Hello again, and a very happy birthday to Laurie Berg, who is something of a fan of these videos of mine. It's people like him and the rest of you who have made this channel so successful. I was rereading this book recently, which I first read 50 years ago. It's called Fugue for a Darkening Island, and it's by Christopher Priest. It really is astounding how some of the events, which at that time in the early 70s seemed like far-fetched dystopian fantasy, are now part of our everyday life. The story is set in Britain, and it centres around the efforts of millions of African refugees and asylum seekers to come to this country by sea, landing illegally. Listen to this passage, which in 1972, when the book was published, would have been thought absolutely absurd. I stood with many others on the beach at Brighton. We were watching the old ship that was drifting in the channel, listing to port at an angle of what the newspapers told us was 20 degrees. It was about a mile from the shore, riding the rough seas uneasily. The lifeboats from Hove, Brighton and Shoreham stood by, awaiting radio confirmation that they might take it in tow. Even down to the efforts of the RNLI lifeboats being called out to help the asylum seekers ashore, you will observe. How anybody could have thought of that in 1972 is utterly beyond me. Eventually, so many Africans land that they begin to displace white British people from whole streets, and then later entire districts. This ends in the balkanisation of Britain and a civil war. How anybody could have been thinking in those terms half a century ago seems to me to be little short of incredible. Another book which I've been rereading is Camp of the Saints, which was published in French within a few months of Fugue for a Darkening Island. The author was Jean Raspail. Immigrants from Africa and Asia overrun Europe, making no effort at all to integrate, but simply take over people's homes. Intriguingly, they then become part of the governments of some European countries, and so invite even more immigrants to overrun Europe. One thinks perhaps of the present British government. I give a link in the description to this video to the Wikipedia page for this particular novel. I recommend both books to viewers who might wish to see a vision of where the present situation might end, unless strong action is taken pretty soon. I also give a link to a PDF copy of Camp of the Saints. Reading those books caused me to wonder if there is possibly a good ending to the present course of events, but I honestly don't see one. If the numbers slowed down or halted, giving those already here in Britain or the rest of Western Europe time to integrate and become part of the host countries, then I suppose that it is just possible that a peaceful resolution might be reached. But there's not the least sign of such a development on the horizon. Instead, we see the numbers accelerating. Germany has just struck a deal with Kenya, for instance, whereby they will invite 250,000 Kenyans into the country to live and work. 250,000. Either these leaders really are completely stupid and blind, or they are actually part of some great conspiracy which has as its ultimate aim the destruction of Western civilization. I will leave it to viewers to decide for themselves which of those two possibilities is the most probable.